Our guest speaker for today is Jim Rodgers. Jim today is going to talk about platters. He has the magic oven technique, which he'll describe for you. And so he's going to be up front, be down here showing you how he does it. A lot of stuff is pre-done, so we don't waste a lot of time. Jim, the program is yours.
Thank you. Is this working okay? Okay, what I want to do today is something perhaps a lot like several demonstrations you may have already seen or soon see. But what I'm going to try to do is do 4 different demonstrations in, an hour plus. And the idea is really to take you through things, all of which could be individual and separate classes. For instance, up on the video when we first started, interesting color. When we first started was a bowl, and I'm going to be doing a class after the first of the year on doing a decorated bowl. Well, today I'm going to do decorated platter, which is pretty much all the same steps. You just have to do a bowl shape instead of a platter shape. So I'm going to take you through that. Well, since all this stuff is things that you may have already seen or done or been participated in past classes, I've got to find some way to make it more interesting. So I thought I would throw in a few mistakes and some catches and things like that. And the idea is you got to figure out when I have this catch. So you got to see if you can catch the catch. Anyway, so I'm going to take you through one portion is going to be turning. Second portion, I'm going to come down here after I've turned the platter. I'm going to transfer a design onto it and show you at least one technique for doing that. And then after I do that, we've already talked about burning wood to cauterize the fibers and also for transferring design. And I'm going to show you how I do that. And it's another technique that any one of these things you could take and adapt and use for your own projects. So I'm just giving you pieces of a whole bunch of different things. Once I've done that, I'm going to burn it. After I burn it, I'm going to colorize it. And after I colorize it, I'm then going to put a finish coat on, or at least one top coat, or first coat. So in essence, what I'm going to do is 4 different pieces of the whole thing. So we've got a couple hours here. Ask me a question, and we may be here till 3 o'clock. So otherwise, we'll be out of here by noon. So, no, anyway, have any questions or comments? Feel free to add them and share them, because I learned a lot of things this morning, things I had never been exposed to before, some things I am forced now to go out and have to buy, things I didn't expect to have to buy, because the next thing we're doing next week on our next video is chainsaw maintenance. So guess where I'm going? To the steel dealer and pick up one of these new file systems. I have the old file system, which works just fine, but I like this one, so I got to go out and pick up one of those things and put it in the video. So I learned how to do it first, so we can then put the video. Anyway, up to the stage, let's get going. So before I start, what I've shown you already, can we get the right camera here? Number 2 there, Ed? Okay, this is my blank. Where's my blank? My blank's way over here. Okay. What I've done on this side, I've just rough bandsawed it. I've drilled a hole on this side. I'm going to tell you how deep that is in a second. The other side I've marked out 2 things. This first circle is the size of the rebate I'm going to cut to hold this onto the jaws of the chuck. I know that's one of the minimal sizes this chuck will use, because I want the jaws as near circular as I possibly can get them, so that we get the best joint. This is where I'm going to shape the underside of the rim. This particular point, because I wanted to match the other 3 I've already done, and so that'll just give me a starting point. I needed to drill a hole here because I'm going to put it onto a screw chuck, which is going to go right into here. This goes in the jaws of the chuck. If I put that in here and screw this on, it's going to go too deep. So I've got a couple of spacers. One happens to be just an old washer. It turns out to be exactly enough that this hole will not bottom out on the thing. So let's just go ahead and stick this in here for a second. these little notches on these, and they have to sit in here properly. And the way they do it is just wiggle it a little bit until I feel the notches drop in properly, and we're all set. So that's sticking out just about the right distance. So this one's sitting into the jaws of the chuck differently than the one I have at home. At home, it sticks out far enough that I need 2 spacers, and as you can see, if I use them here, it wouldn't bite at all, so that's not necessary. So let's take a look at the map. I measured the thickness of my bowl, and it's 15/16, almost an inch. And I know I want the bottom to be about 1/4 of an inch, so that's 4/16. So that leaves me 11/16. And so I now know how deep I want to take the bottom here. I've got the 1/4 inch here. My rebate in the bottom is an eighth. It's going to be 1/8 of an inch. That's 2/16. So my drill hole has to be 9/16. So you look at my blank sideways. Okay, right? So I have a rebate I'm going to cut in here. It's going to be 1/8 of an inch deep. So I need the drill hole on this side. That's my drill bit, believe it or not. This depth to here. It's 9/16. So it's a 1/2 inch down to this shoulder. And I'm using a bullet point bit, which has a tip on it that's about 1/16 of an inch long. So when my hole, I'm shaping out the inside of this, gets down to a little tiny hole, I know I'm within a 1/16 inch of the depth I want to be. So.
You say a bullet, like a brad point bit?
No, it's a bullet point bit. So the bit literally is shaped like that hole.
Okay.
Brad point bit would just put a little bit of a small dimple. Yeah, dimple's a good word. I like dimple. So what I'm going to do here is just go ahead and mount this. These have to sit tight to the jaws. Oh, that's good. Now, generally, I don't need the tailstock for this, but before I do anything, I'm going to mark the center. I need, for my last step, to be able to know where the precise center of this piece is. I'm going to put it on a vacuum check for the last step. So, I've got a mark. I picked up a tool rest that I particularly like. I like these little round bar ones. Don't need a big one. So I'm going to have to cut my 1/8 inch depth here. 2 tools I need is something that will cut it. In this case, just a wide parting tool and something I can measure with. So let's go for 1/8 of an inch. There's my 1/8 inch. That's all deeper I need to go. So I haven't turned this on yet, so let's turn the lathe down to 0 speed. Bring it up. So it's not running perfectly square, and I don't much care right now. The only thing I want to have perfect is this area right in here at this moment. So I'm going to come in here straight. I'm going to go down about 1/8. That's it. No. A couple thousandths more. Another couple thousandths. Now I know I'm using this parting tool as a scraper, because I'm going straight in. We know that parting tools really are bevel rubbing tools in most circumstances, but not in this one. Okay, there's my 1/8 inch. Now it's important I have a flat bottom, which I just created. The next thing's important is I have a nice square shoulder here. So I'm going to widen this just a little bit. Begin with another flat bottom straightener. Okay, ready to mount. It won't hurt to be sure that inside corner is perfectly clean. No, wrong skew. Wrong skew. So that's ready to heat up. So the next thing I'm going to do is turn the underside of the lip. Yeah, speed looks okay for a minute. You don't ever want to come out here with a gouge and hit the edge of this piece. Half the wood coming around is going to cut really nice. The other half is going to want to tear out like this, so that's just not a good thing. You always come into a raw edge from the side. So I'm just going to undercut this is the underside of the lip. Bowl gouge. Yeah, I could use some more speed. Nothing wrong with this thing, is guess where all the chips go? Bummer.
Of course, you're wearing a face shield, right?
Either that or don't talk and turn. Right. No, just hit an edge. Now why worry about shape?
Jim, I really hear a lot of vibration going as you get close to that edge.
Say again.
I hear a lot of vibration in the wood as you get closer and closer to that edge.
Right.
Any, I mean, that can distort the cut.
No, I'm not too worried about it. But there was vibration, you're right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pull cut across that now and do a little bit of shearing. Just for the purpose of kind of cleaning this up a little bit. And taking out any vibration marks. When you get vibration, you got to do something to change the resin point. Change the cut, change the sharpness, change the speed. So I think my rim is done. So we're going to sand it. Oop, didn't come on. only worried about this area here. Inertial sander. 120.
Is that better than the other one?
180. Okay, the other side's done. So now we're going to take it off and we're going to reverse it, do the face. I'll get this stuff here at the very end. In the background you hear John Cobb with his chainsaw prepping the wood for the holiday sale. And I'm going to have some really great wood for the auctions. Okay, let's turn this down, close it up, press, open, and I could tighten this a lot because I've got a huge amount of surface here for this thing to pinch into. Okay, it's on the lathe, ready to do the face. Back to my bolt gouge. Now the face is not running true to that tenon in the back, so that's okay because the first thing I'm going to do is true it up. A little pull cut across here. Just to clean up the surface. And the reason for doing that is just so the tool will ride smoothly when I make my cuts the other direction, which is where I'm going to go next. So I'm going to work from here down to about here, and that's rim. I'll worry about the inside later. So, more speed will help. By just looking down, I'm judging where the inside needs to be to match the outside. Fun thing about this, I get to throw the chips at you, rather than you. So now I need to work on how thin I want the rim. Much thinner than that. Now I'm just about at the right thickness. I'm just about at the bottom of the rim, so I'm going to not go complete yet. The point is I want to put a bead right here, and I need to have a little proud wood in order to do that bead. I have to figure out where the bead is going to be. It's going to be right about there. As the wood gets thin, because this has been sanded, I have no problem with holding this from the back side. Let's finish off the thickness here. here's where I'm going to transition to the bowl. And the thickness is pretty uniform. A little thick out on the rim. Cheers, Scott. Okay, it's getting thicker down at the bottom, but I expect that. So the bead, not going to be any taller than that. And I'm going to go down into the bowl. So let's put the bead in. I'm using a D-way beading tool. It's going to go right there. I'm going to take a little more of this off just so I can get the tool rest in focus. See the bottom? Now, let's put the bead in. This tool is used this direction. There's the bead. Now I need to clean the edge of that up. And I want to get right down to the edge of that bead, and I want to get as close as possible. I'm going to use the tip of a skew chisel used as a scraper. Just to clean that little edge up right there. Now I've got to do the same thing over here, but I don't have room for it yet, so I'll lay it aside. I'll come back to it in a minute. Go away. Those in somebody's eyes. I'm going to move the tool rest over just a little bit because I want to be able to get here cleanly. So there is my 1/4 inch thickness. Vibration. Now this is not the way I want to finish this here, but I now can get in here with my skew chisel and take this side off of it from around the bead. Right up to the bead now. So the bead's clean on both sides. And I want to perfect that bottom as much as I can. I have an old skew chisel I've had for years, and it's ground round in the radius. It's good for getting into places like this as a scraper. I need to clean that up right there. What I'm doing now is just trying to take out as much of the toolbox as I can. A little high here in the center, I see. I'm going to go a little bit less than my 1/4 inch. And if I had a straight edge, I'd lay this across here and take a look at my curve. A shorter one would have been better. Don't have one. Shorter one would be better. There's always backup plans. And what I'm doing is examining the shape of the curve. It's still a little bit high in the center for me. I want to take just a little bit more off of the center. It kind of goes like that. Not much. So we've roughly finished it. Back to sanding. And now I'm going to use a power sander. And the reason is, reciprocal sander's fine out here, but it doesn't do me much good down in here because the wood isn't moving very much. So I've got to find another way to sand it down into the center. And the reciprocal sander is going to be the trick. So I'm going to go through the same kind of grits. Oh, that's interesting. I can't plug them both in at the same time. Well, I can switch them real fast, I suppose.
There's a plug over here. You got a cord right over here by the monitor.
Got it. Perfect. There's always a solution. Thank you, guys. I didn't plan that. Okay, dust. This is Milwaukee, same thing as the Sioux angle grinder. It's variable speed. It's also reversible. I don't know, 400 or 500, something like that. Okay, it's one to bounce on me. Pick up the other direction. Oh, Julie, thank you. I appreciate it. Whatever's next, 180.
Didn't you do anything separate for the bead? Jim, do you do anything separate for the bead?
No, I'm going to leave the bead alone.
You don't try to sand it or touch it?
I'm not going to try to touch it at all, but I am going to take a piece of sandpaper, fold it up, and come up and do right to the edges last. I take all these discs, fold them so I can get a clean edge right up against the edge of that bead, but I'm not going to touch the bead. Good question. And that was 180, 220. By the way, I'm not using the disc here. I have an intermediate on top of it. The point of the intermediate is if these discs get hot, these little plastic Velcro hooks will collapse eventually. And so rather than lose this whole thing here, I just simply pull this intermediate off, throw it away, and get another one from the store and change that thing out. So heating of the sandpaper melts the little hooks on the Velcro, so don't use it straight on the thing, use an intermediate in there. Hard ones, medium ones, soft ones, so you can change the hardness of the whole sanding disc, but I like it a little flexible. That's already on it. Change direction. So let's go back to about 180. And what I'm going to try to do is come right up to the edge of these beams. Outside, inside, just using a sharp, clean edge. Actually, it's easy to do the inside on the backside where it throws the sawdust right in my face, but it's easier to get in there. So we've done the back of the lip, we've done the inside of the lip, we've done the basic of the bowls, device. Now I have to finish the back. So the first thing to do unwind, put that away, take my chuck key, righty-loosey, lefty-tighty in this case. I'm going to take the chuck off. And I'm going to put on the vacuum chuck. This is one of the one-way vacuum chucks. Come in 3 different sizes. This is the smallest. It seems to be adequate for what I need to do here. Now I need to get this thing here on here centered. And now you may know why I put that mark on the bottom. So then I can come up here, put it right back on that mark. Vacuum truck on. Oh yeah, got good vacuum. Done with that. And now I can finish the rest of the bottom. I'm going to go down to this depth right here all the way across. And I need the rest. And I need my bowl gouge. And I need, I'll keep the speed low until I turn it on. This is what happens. Now one thing, because this may not be running perfect because of the bulb and all that sort of stuff, one thing I'd like to do is not necessarily touch this edge right here. I know it's fairly square. So I'm going to start a little bit inside of that because I need a bottom a foot for my platter. So I'm going to start about here and turn this away. The last thing I'm going to remove is this. By leaving that there, I always have a sense of how deep that bottom is. And I know if I go deeper than that, I'm going under 1/4 inch wall thickness. Okay, here we go. See? It's not running true. Now I'm doing something I don't like doing. I'm going to leave that on, obviously. I don't like cutting across the surface of something that's being held on the vacuum chuck. I prefer to cut toward the vacuum chuck, the purpose of which is I'm not trying to move it. If this was, let's say, a poor vacuum, I got a really great vacuum going right here. I probably can't jerk it off. But if I was having a poor vacuum because the wood was pulling or it was a poor system, pushing this way could displace the alignment. But I got a good system here, and I'm going to try to take light cuts while I get down to the bottom. But I would prefer, generally, if I had an option, to cut that direction rather than that direction. Tighten up a little bit. Aiming for the bottom of my rebate there. Close, not there yet. That'll do it. Now I can take this off. Maybe just a smidge high. Right to the center, as I push across, I don't have much turning momentum, so I really like a full cut if I can do it. Okay, now let's finish off the bottom. Very light cuts here. Wait. Take the time. Light pressure. You can create a decorative mark if you wanted to. Very slow. And it's still bumped up a little bit in the center. Okay, gonna come like good now. Now I need to run 3 seconds. It's not gonna happen, is it? Start with 120 again. I can run this. I can run the vacuum. I can run the lathe. But given all the different things I need, I can't run the dust collector at all. So everybody, when I start to cut, you all inhale.
One more opening over here on the power strip.
platter off. And we need to turn off dust quick. So, we have our platter. I did take the calipers and check it. Oh, look how thick it is. Oh! So, a little under a quarter, 3/16. About an eighth, and it gets thicker as it goes down to here intentionally, so that was the plan. Okay, so we created what we wanted to do, just a draft piece. And yeah, I could do more work on it, but it's good enough for us to take on to the next stage. So I'm going to come down here and we'll reset, and we're going to show you what the next step of creating this platter is going to be. So the next step is for us to come up with a design to go onto here. And there's a lot of places you can go and you can do anything you want to. There's some books that I go to a lot. Oh, I have faced in my direction. Okay. This is a Dover coloring book. Yeah, look at that. They're just line drawings. Nice thing about line drawings is every one of these things is easy for us to transfer and reuse in other formats. So there's one. Birds, if you're interested in it. Flowers, and all sorts of different ones. And each of these have, well, for instance, something like this. This is going to be a little difficult because there's a lot of detail in here, and maybe more difficult than I'd want, or maybe I'd leave some detail out. There's all sorts of options. What I did for this particular project is I went on the internet and I looked for ivy. I came up with some ivy patterns. Didn't like that because I could have blown that up and put that around the rim if I'd wanted to. That was kind of okay. That one didn't have as much detail as I liked. So anyway, I kept fiddling around and finding different ones. And I liked this one. That's a little smaller, so I made it a little bit bigger. And because I don't want to transfer the color, I went to my printer and I printed the same thing out in black and white. Now, for the technique I'm going to show you, printing it in black and white has a requirement. Oh, here's a smaller version I'm not using. It has to be printed on a laser printer, not your typical inkjet like you might have at home. I have inkjet, but I also have a laser printer at home. The laser printer transfers the design by laying down what the toner, which are little tiny plastic globules, what they are, and they are electrostatically adhered to the paper. And then they're sent through a roller which heat treats it and fuses it into the paper. So I actually have plastic here. And this is something I can transfer from paper to wood. So the technique is simply a matter, and I'm not going to transfer it all the way around here. You figure out what you want to do. So this is lesson number 2. I'm going to just do one. So I'm going to figure out how to place them. I'm going to place maybe 5 of them around here. That's what I did on the other one, so you can. I'm cutting around it roughly. So I'm leaving a little bit of a margin. Because once I figure out where I want it to go, face down, I need a little more clearance, so I might take a little more paper out of here. Figure where I want it to go. Let's say that's where it needs to be. So it doesn't go wandering around. I'm going to tape it down. I'm taping in places where I see there is no image on the other side. Four tapes kind of is enough. There's a little spot right there I can put it. Okay, so that's step 1. Get a design, get it printed. If you don't have a laser printer, you can go to Kinko's. They can print it for you on their big machines, which are all toner-based. If you're here, you can go into the office and ask Denise to make you a copy. And the printers they have there are all toner-based. Now, I got to get it from here onto the wood. And there's a couple ways to do that. One way is to use heat. And if you go into your razor tip catalog or some of the other woodworking catalogs, you'll find basically miniature versions of a iron, which you press against this and heat it. The heat then causes this plastic toner to be released and transferred onto the wood, so you can heat it and transfer it. I'm going to transfer it chemically. And what I'm going to use is, if you go over to Blick or any of the art supply places, you will find what are called blender pens. And this is a blender pen, and what they call it is blender. And if you smell it, it's atrocious smell. It is xylene, or xylol was the xylene. It's a very volatile solvent, and it's a solvent that will dissolve this toner. And you can buy them, and when they're completed, you can throw them away, or like I do, I take the cap off, I pull the piece of felt out of here, and I have a quart of xylene sitting on my shelf in the shop, which I don't even know if you can buy it anymore. Can't? Well, I have a quart. So you got to go to Nevada to get it probably now.
If you go get some denatured alcohol at the same time.
Yeah, while you're there, pick up some.
They stopped selling that here.
99% alcohol for whatever. What I then do is simply transfer some into here. I use a syringe and just put it in here, and it drops down into the cotton down in here. And this pen's been with me for years. And that quart of xylol will last me probably the rest of my life also, unless I sniff it and die of brain cell damage. So anyway, I'm going to rub this on here. It's going to turn translucent. And the next step I'm going to do is, right after I rub this on, I'm then going to take and burnish the back of this to be sure that the softened material now is transferred onto the wood. And I would stick all 5 pieces down here normally and do them all. Got to have eyes. Okay, so we're in the center. Yeah, good.
Question, Jim?
Yes.
Do you like the chemical process versus the burnishing with the heat?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's the way I've always done it, and it's always worked. And while the other one may also work, I've just never tried it, and I'm not switching away from something that's worked for me. I don't see any reason why the other method wouldn't work equally as well. And if you get a razor tip, you can find these things, little triangular, flat burning tips. Is that the way you do it? You heat transfer?
I haven't tried it, but I do have that tip.
Yeah, and the key is transfer onto a piece of scrap wood first, because you've got to get the temperature set just right, too hot, too cold. And the idea is, every time you do anything that involves heat or burning or something like that, have a piece of test wood of the same material set aside so that you can always try things. And I'll show you my test in a minute. Okay, let's transfer one. My job is, oh, I'm not going to get in the picture. That's going to work out good. Look how that comes out. Now, all I'm doing is making the paper translucent.
It's like magic.
Now, that's not it. Yeah, I have maybe too much xylene in the pen. This one over here bled. And sometimes you don't get a complete design transfer. And basically, for the next step, it doesn't really matter too much, because I can kind of figure out where it's supposed to be if it's not there. I missed a spot right up here. Look at that. Now, it stinks like heck up here. Excuse that. That's design transfer. And what I would do is transfer them all. And my experience has been to let this sit here until the paper starts to evaporate the solvents before I take the piece off, just so I don't have any smudges. But that's what it looks like. So it comes off pretty doggone clean. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of dark areas. So if you pick a design that has less solids in it and more lines, you're going to be better off. Because I'm going to fill it with color or whatever I choose to use myself later on. So I'd go all the way around and do that. So there it is. Darn, isn't that interesting? The magic oven, there we go. But the point of it is that I've already done one with 5 designs right now. This may be kind of the design you'd like, or maybe you'd rather add something in here, nothing out here, it's whatever. So now, I need to make this permanent on here towards the goal of coloring it. And to do that, I'm going to burn every one of these lines. And I'm going to use my wood burning. There's a lot on the market. I have a unit here that's called Etchmaster. I bought it from Woodcraft many years ago. It's not even being made anymore. What I like about it is I can put everything I need inside. It's the lowest power doggone unit I've ever seen. And most of the new ones from Razor Tip and Burnmaster and all these companies are much more powerful. And they tend to hold the heat longer. When I press the pen down, I lose heat immediately, and it has to build the temperature back up again. Some of them recover faster than mine does. So there's lots of different pens that you can buy for these units. The ones I'm going to be using look like this. There's dozens and dozens of the pens. These are all from a company called Razor Tip. They're good for design transfer. There's ball-shaped tips, which are good for signatures and freehand drawing. There are ones for shading. And the catalog you want to get, I got to remember, I got to put it in my direction, is Razor Tip.
Razor Tip is catalog in the back.
You have some back here? Great. Razor Tip is probably the leading producer of tips and burning systems nowadays. Also, when I take one of these old discontinued units of mine and they wear out, they do wear out, the metal fatigues, the metal will eventually break, and then of course they won't heat anymore. So I send them to Razor Tip. I send them $5 US in the envelope, and they will rebuild anybody's pen for $5. They don't care about the brand. They'll fix it and they'll send it back to you. It's not necessarily quick. Sometimes it's a couple of 3 weeks. You kind of almost forgot you had it when you sent it. But Razor Tip does rebuild them, and they've rebuilt some of my Etchmaster tips, as well as some of my, these are Razor Tips the way they come. My system uses this kind of a plug. The Razor Tip system uses this kind of a plug. Do not use your audio cables. Although it looks like an RCA audio cable, it is the same shape and form. But this is designed to carry a lot higher current than your audio systems are, and you would fry it in about a few seconds. There are adapters. I have an adapter cord here that plugs into this. The other end plugs into my Razor Tip. There are several different companies who make burning tips. Everybody has an adapter, so you can take anybody's tip and put it into anybody's system, and they all will work together. You just have to get the right adapter for it. So this is my adapter that holding it up here, and the camera's down here. This is my adapter cord to take a Razor Tip into my Burnmaster system. So for burning, let me put this pen back. By the way, this is one of these things called a shader. See how flat that is? It's also could be used to transfer that design. Shaders are worked by drawing it like this slightly across the wood at a low setting, and it just toasts the wood surface to whatever degree you want. So you can create shading by using this kind of a tool. When Dixie is here, you're going to have a whole day of this sort of stuff. She is a worldwide expert, and if you have any interest in surface decoration, embellishment, carving, burning, coloring, you're going to love that presentation.
When's she coming?
When's she coming?
April 3rd.
April the 3rd.
It's
the 3rd?
misprinted. It's misprinted
No?
on the website.
Is it the 3rd?
As of last night.
No,
The first
it's the second,
Saturday.
it's 11th, isn't it?
No.
4th?
Fourth.
Third?
Third. First Saturday.
First Saturday, okay, we've changed this from a normal week to a week earlier. It's the 3rd of April, and be sure to check the website and the newsletter. 4th Okay, I'm getting corrected on the exact number, but it's the first Saturday. Our meeting's moved to accommodate her schedule, and it's going to be wonderful. If you're a Chuck Turner and you're not used to doing embellishments, it's a great time to consider the possibility of things that you might be able to add to enhance your projects and your turning into the future. So I would say it's going to be a great day. Okay, so here I am ready to go, almost. I have a little brass brush. I have a piece of maple that came off of the same board that this is cut out of. This gives me a chance to test the heat on my tip. I have selected the pen that I want to use, not that one. This one. What I like about this particular one, and you may not be able to see it, is the tip is rounded and it's very flat in this plane. What that's going to allow me to do is be able to move around the curve and trace a curved line with a little practice. Now, I'm not so darn sure I'm going to be able to do it really well here for you this morning, but I'm going to give it a shot. I do know that I need something else other than my normal eyes. In fact, Steve, would you do me a favor? Go into my office, and on my desk is my regular glasses, not my safety glasses. I would prefer them because over my regular glasses, I'm going to wear my mag eyes. And this is just a little bulky. It's the same magnification. And this is not adequate. I need both pair. So while those are coming, maintenance on this thing, as you begin to burn through it, you're going to begin to pick up a little bit of carbon on these. And it's important that you clean it from time to time. Thank you very much. I don't need safety glasses here, but I do need to be able to see what I'm doing. This is step one. This is step two. Now at home, where is it? Oh, there it is. At home, I would also have a couple of lights rigged up here, purpose of which is to get as much illumination as possible. That thing's always going to be in the wrong place. The other thing that I rig up when I'm doing a major burning operation is I have a small fan, very small fan, very quiet, and I do not blow it at my work. I blow it the other direction so that it sucks the smoke away. If I blew it towards my work, I would end up cooling my pen tip and other bad things like that. So what you do is set up a small fan, blow it the other direction. In the summer, where I live, there's almost always a nice breeze in the afternoon, so I open the side door to my garage, I open the front door to my garage, which invites the neighbors to come over. But it also generates that slight flow of air through the garage, and that just moves the smoke out just really nice. So I don't even need the fan in the summer. In the winter, it's important to pull that away. Okay, so here's step one. Power on. My dial is set from low to high in 10 steps, and I have no idea what the right power setting for this is at the moment. But I'm going to guess it's around 7. I do not want this thing to turn cherry red. That shortens the life on it. It also is more heat than I need for my process. But I'm going to test it on my little block here. I'm not pushing hard. Okay, it's beginning to color just a little bit. No, it's not quite hot enough. So I'll go up another letter. You see how that does a nice line? It's across the grain. When you go with the grain, it wants to dig in. So when you go with the grain, doing wood burning, very light touch, recognizing that you have to be able to move past it somehow. So, and I'm not going to do all this. You're going to say, thank heaven. Okay, I'm going to pick one of these spots. And I'm going to get down here close. Sorry about that. If I'm in, am I in your way? Not yet?
A little bit.
Now this board, from which I built this, is a piece of cross-grained wood. So one of these patterns I'm cutting around the stem here, and I'm going across the grain. It's going really great. Someplace else on this blank, when I get to it, I'm going to go down that stem and I'm going to be right in the grain. As a result, oh, that's going to be a different feel and it's going to behave differently, and that's going to be an oh heck if you're not careful. So just be aware when you're with it and when you're across the grain. Okay, so put the stem on. Let's do at least one of these little puppies. Now I'm not going to put all this detail in. Here's one side of that leaf. So the other side of that leaf. I'm going to put the stem in, a little bit of the ribs. And I did that side of this leaf, but I didn't do the back side. See how that turns so nice? Now this one's nothing but black. But I don't care, because once I get this burned in, the next thing I'm going to do is come in here with a little acetone and take all that black transferred ink away. I don't need it anymore. In fact, I don't want it anymore. If I sand it to get it away, I'm just going to push some of that ink down into the fibers of the wood, and I'm going to end up with gray spots. So I want to use a solvent to get it off. So I've done this leaf. Let's take the stem over here. Because I've rounded the tip on this tool, I actually can work it backwards. On stems and flowers, you can do 2 lines. And then with 2 lines, you then can put color in the middle. Since I'm doing 1 line, the burned line is going to be it. That's it, I can't color. It's going to be a black stem on this particular ivy. So let's do 1 more leaf and then we'll call it started properly. Now I stopped for a second. And when I stopped for a second, the pen continued to heat up. So I got to recognize that when I first started back again, the tip is warmer than it was before. Okay, a few little marks. You can see we can go all the way around. I've done that much. I have to finish that thing 5 times. So one of the interesting things, power off. By the way, hot metal and cold metal look pretty much the same color. So my little gizmo has a rack to clip this on. And if you do enough burning and you continue to burn, one of the things that ends up happening, the shaft of these different devices get hot. And I have some fingertips I can put on, like this.
Like a silicone.
There's silicone. There's a set of 3 for holding these things and protecting your fingers from getting too warm. I hardly ever use them, but if I'm doing something where I'm burning a lot of, maybe stamping the design on, I might use my silicone finger cuts. So, it's totally cool by now, so it just doesn't take but a second for it to. Questions, comments so far?
Could you use carbon paper to do the tracing?
Good. The question is, Gary's asked, could you use carbon paper? And the answer is, I would prefer not to use carbon paper, but I would use graphite paper. Graphite paper is designed specifically for tracing. Carbon paper has an oily, waxy material in it, and that is not so good, but the graphite paper doesn't. So in essence, the concept is absolutely, you lay that down, print your design on a piece of tissue paper, graphite paper, design, and then you would use a stylus with a small round tip and literally trace it around, and that would transfer it also. That works equally well. Another way of doing it. I've never done it. I've always had a wood burner, so I think it's a little less messy in some ways. So yes, you can do that. So I transfer all the designs around. And it didn't look like a heck of a lot different. But this is with the transfer material removed. And all you see here is lines that were burned in. So we now have a platter where I've taken off the stuff. Yes?
Jim, you were describing, just very briefly, so I didn't quite catch it. You said you would rather not sand, you'd rather use a solvent. And
Yeah.
so what solvent are you using? How much?
I use acetone.
Acetone.
Yeah. The trick is when I start to rub with something that's a mild solvent, it tends to, of course, lift up the plastic beads and spread them all over every place.
And so I end up with a lot of gray area, and so you want a fairly active solvent, something that will dissolve that pretty quickly. So I don't want to rub too far. I would rub right in this area and then try to dab it away. Try sanding it once, and you'll find that you just messed up the surface of the wood all the way around. So I use acetone. It tries to work. I tried alcohol. It's not strong enough. MEK, methyl ethyl ketone, paint thinner, and all those things, they're just not strong enough. It's not strong enough. So acetone seems to be the one I choose. John?
What do you use it for an applicator, like a small sponge or?
Q-tips work great.
Oh, okay.
I want to localize the removal as much as I possibly can. So if I can dab it on there and then take a paper towel and lift, taper it. Yeah, I may have to rub a little bit, but I sure don't want to. Now, if I'm going to color this whole thing to some dark color, I can probably be a little less rigorous because I'm going to hide a little bit of that transfer under some pigment, which is just plan ahead. You know, if this is going to be some dark color back in here, sure, rub a little bit. You might get away with it. Yeah. Other questions, comments? Yeah, dark wood, it doesn't show up near. Joel's saying dark wood is not near the problem, and that's also the case. Not near the same problem. Okay, we burned it on. We got this. And now the next step is going to be to add the color. And I think that's the real fun part of the whole thing. This burning stuff on feels tedious to me. And so Bob Nolan and I started working with burned on and colored pieces about the same time. I went one direction, he went a different. I do what I call mosaic patterns, Middle Eastern flat designs, and Bob's gone to the Vascular illusions, so has Jean-Louis and so on. That's fine, it's just much more complex than what I do, so I'm doing the simple route of stuff. However, even though I'm doing simple designs and simple transfers, I still can buy a lot of stuff. So I bought a lot of stuff.
Here's a black hole.
This is my kit of pens, colored pens. To give you a sense of what's in here, because you can't see them all, I made up a color chart. This is a piece of cherry. And the pens that I buy these are Copic, one brand. Prismacolor, it's another brand. And the third one I like is Faber-Castell, the third brand. But the key is whatever you're going to transfer onto, make up a color chart. My idea is this is Prismacolor color chart by number, and this is what it looks like on cherry. Here's Copic, and what those colors look like on cherry. It's going to look different on cherry than it is on maple, then on walnut, and so on. So the idea is I have a color chart that gives me a clue as what these colors are going to end up looking like. I have no idea what that is, but that's cherry, and obviously I've been practicing on the back. So, I think we probably started off with Prismacolor originally. It has a small fine tip on one end. It has a larger brush type tip on the other end. And if you go to any of the art supply places, there'll be thousands of these things, basically, in different colors. This one's a nice one. Brush tip again. Fine tip on this end. This is the Copic. And this is the Faber-Castell, which does not come but with one tip. But I like them because the tips are so small and so tiny and so controllable. They all have a tendency, as you rub them against wood, to slowly frizz up. And instead of being nice and sharp and tiny, they tend to get more like brushes instead of like pen tips. So in my kit, I have a razor blade or two, purpose of which is to re-trim that back down. Be very cautious doing that. The reason is, in the center of this tip, there is a small capillary tube that brings the ink down into the tip. And if that capillary tube is cut, it's like cutting your femoral artery. It's going to bleed out all the color, and you're done with that pen. And you may have done it over a piece of work, and now you've stained it a new color. So, there are other marks on the. There's other kind of pens on the market. Our experience has been, based on doing a bunch of research, that these are the ones that are most color fast, meaning over time they'll fade the least amount.
Are they dyes? Are they dyes or are they?
They are dyes. And Bob did a platter once with a bunch of different pens, and he put it in the window of his truck and drove around for 6 months with it sitting in the window of his truck. Purpose of which is to see how color fast these are. There's a brand which I really like. It's a nice pen. It's a nice shape and it's fun to work with, called Tombow. I think that's been used by a couple of other famous artists. A couple of famous artists, not other famous artists. But they're not color fast. So if you're going to display it inside under incandescent lighting and you put a UV resistant top coat over it, you might be okay with it. They're certainly okay for a period of time. So we just tend not to use those. So for this particular project, I could have shaded into these leaves to give it a sense of depth, but I found another way to do it for this one. I'm going to put on the leaf with this color green from my Copic set. And I have this other green, which is a darker shade, which I can go back and touch up in certain areas and give it that sense of depth or thickness. So instead of shading it in with the wood burner, I'm going to shade it in with another color of green. And this is not a lot of fun to watch, but if you're really into this sort of stuff, it's going to be great. John, comment?
Alcohol-based.
Alcohol-based?
Because I had some water-based, and they didn't do anything. So.
No. Now, one of the reasons for doing the burning, as Gary was, did you said that about the cauterizing of the fibers? Someone did in their show and tell. The idea is that as I touch this to the wood, the pigment will run along the grain and the fibers of the wood. And it stops where it hits the burn line. Because what you've done, you've cauterized the fibers so that it just won't go any farther. So I don't have to paint up to the edge. I just have to paint in the middle and hope it doesn't go beyond the edge. And if I did my burning right, it won't. So, I mean, that works out really, really nice. So it's really easy to do. The worst thing to do is just to start off being not careful and put the pen in the wrong place. John Louis has to do one thing I don't have to do. He has to count. So when he puts a pattern down, it's got to repeat many times as it goes around a vessel, and you better get the count right every time or you have really messed it up. Here, I've either colored it or I didn't, and it's a much easier, I'm easier off the hook here. So, okay. So, back to 2 sets of eyes, banging the microphone. And I'm going to come down here. And at home, I do this at my desk in the office. And I'm up here, about this close. And I get the tunes on. I've got a little glass of iced tea sitting right here. And this is just fun. You just spend hours sitting here doing this sort of stuff. So here's my light green. I'm going to use the small tip. You see how that's a fairly large tip that comes right to a little tiny point? That's great. And once that starts fuzzing up, I'm going to take my razor blade and play with it a little bit, recarve it. I've never tried to refill these because I never have the right dyes. They're just disposable. And I got hundreds of them anyway in here. So let me come over here with, I'm going to take this one right here. I hope I'm not too much of it. Am I out of your view?
See the top 3 leaves.
Okay, there's one. Now getting up in this corner, be careful. Now, if I didn't do that perfectly, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going up and having supper, resting, watching a half an hour TV, and then coming back and taking a look at it again. I will always see something that I didn't see before. This can be gone over time after time. So I'm going to go all the way around and do all these leaves. And then I might go back.
So if you make a mistake, is there?
I don't make mistakes. I have design opportunities.
If you have a major design opportunity, will the acetone take that off, or
Oh, no,
DNA?
you're stuck with it. You're just stuck with it. You can, if it's very light on the surface, you could sometimes scrape it. I've taken a razor blade and scraped off very small things, but it's not very likely that that's going to
quickly,
work.
quickly, if not, you.
Yeah, the longer you wait, the farther that dye sinks into the wood fibers, and you better do it right now.
Yeah.
I've not been very successful at scraping it, but as long as I'm doing designs like this. Now, if I went outside this line and really messed this one up, I'm gonna go back with my wood burner, and I'm gonna reshape the leaf with wood burning to make that part suddenly back inside the line again. So it really is a design opportunity, and I would treat it that way. But on this leaf right here, I picked one of the smaller ones. I should have maybe picked a bigger one. But I'm going to go right down into the center of it with this darker marker. And I doubt if our cameras are well enough equipped to see that. But what I've done is I've created a little darkness right in the center of it, which maybe gives it a sense of some depth. Not a great deal. So far, so good. Each one of these things I've done so far could be a hobby in and of itself. And it is fun to play with. So go over to one of the art supply stores, pick up 3 or 4 color pens, transfer a design onto something flat. Flat's better. I do it on curved things. I've done it on that curved bowl. And the key there is to get that design around a curved edge. It requires you doing a lot of cutting and clipping of the piece so it will conform. That's what you end up with. Now, I'm going to put some finish on this. And the finish I'm going to use, I'm only going to put on after it's been sitting there for days. I would not put finish on this thing the next day. There's several ways to complete this project. One is to spray on what's called workable fixative. You can buy that at the art supply stores too.
Don't do it in a closed room.
Yeah, workable fixative is basically very thin lacquer. So it's highly volatile. I've done that, and it works fine. What that does is seal your design and locks it in, then you can go back to your regular finishing techniques after that. I also found that if I just let it sit long enough and let it cool, I can go right to my Minwax Wipe on Poly and just put it on. First coat of poly is a fixative, is a surface sealer. And what I do is I don't rub it on. I blot it on. First coat. Second coat, I treat it like any other thing, and then I can continue to build coats until I get the finish I want, which could be glossy or could be matte. It's whatever piece is. So,
Now, Jim,
yes.
on your first coat of your wipe on poly over the design, you're gonna wipe the whole block, the whole rim. You're gonna blot the
Whole platter.
whole platter.
Yeah. I don't want to just do this. I'm actually putting a coat of finish on, but I'm just being very cautious in this area here. Yeah. So I buy my Minwax Wipe on Poly in the smallest containers I can find, and they're never small enough. Oh, this is something I failed to do ahead of time.
Okay, we're the Menly Men.
It's called
Oh boy, well, if I took this top off, you would see me dipping in one of my makeup sponges. I decant this, I bought a quart. I couldn't buy the pint size, I found a quart, so I decanted it into 5 different bottles. Did he do it?
No.
Yes.
It's called channel locks.
Or get the knife blade into the little cord.
Oh, there's all sorts of tricks we can do here, none of which will for me.
Just wax paper between the lid and the thing is the only way to.
Or put some
It
Vaseline.
would have saved me a lot of trouble, wouldn't it? You know, that's, I'm gonna take all the other bottles when I get home and do that. That's a good suggestion. Yeah, that has, of course, it has a kind of a rubbery seal in here, and it's been coated with a little bit of the finish, and it's act like a glue, and it just cemented itself down. But all my finishing is done typically with makeup sponges. You can get them at any drugstore in the beauty supply area. My wife found me a bag with 150, and they're not as good a sponge as the ones that I have been using. These have a tendency to expand, but that's okay. So this is a brush, and next time I might use this side here to blot stuff on. And if we don't do it, you've seen finish put on
pieces before, so if we get it, it'll be great. If we don't, they're in there. Next thing you hear is glass breaking, and you know that my demo is finished.
Oh, no. Yeah.
But anyway, I use these things for almost everything when I apply finish. I'm going to apply finish to this side. I'm going to wait 24 hours, then do this side. But I do want to apply finish on both sides equally as I go. I want to keep moisture transfer the same on both sides. It's like doing hollow vessels. When you finish the outside and make it look nice, you've got to finish the inside to keep moisture transfer uniform, even on hollow vessels. Examination is over. Right? It may be that we're not able to go any farther, but you understand what I'm going to do next. But I did wait. I guess I put this on here a couple weeks ago. So it's been here quite a while. So this is really dry and as dry as it can be. But I am not going to rub that finish on. I literally am going to blot it on this area.
All right. Sometimes it
You
takes
get
a
it?
village.
Oh, wow.
Take the village, yeah.
Put my glove back on again. I buy these and I keep reusing them until they fall apart. So one box from Harbor Freight lasts me maybe a year.
Costco, throw them away.
Okay.
Would you use a spray can there?
You can use spray finishes if you like. They actually are nice on things because there's no chance of me rubbing it and smearing it around. You're absolutely right. I don't do spray very well. We've had some members in here who have brought in beautiful pieces, well done with lacquer, sprayed from the rattle can. It's a technique that you have to learn to develop yourself. There's too much and too little. And I've never was good at it, so I've kind of stayed away from my rattle cans. But the spray coat that goes on here, which is a workable fix of it, one coat, that's enough. That's going to lock that thing down. So, and my finish of choice is, thank you very much for getting this open. There's the problem. Has been Minwax Wipe-On Poly clear gloss. And the biggest reason I use that over anything else is I've used it so long that I know how it's going to behave. And it and I have a relationship that says, I know how this is going to act. It doesn't say it's any better than somebody else's, although Fine Woodworking has written some comparative articles that said this is one of the better ones in terms of going bad in the can. It doesn't go bad as fast as others. When you put it on the wood, it yellows less than some other finishes. And I always build with gloss. If I want a glossy finish, I'm going to build with gloss. If I want a matte finish, I'm going to build with gloss and cut the top coat back to the matte look that I want. The reason is, if you use semi-gloss or matte, it's labeled that way on the can, you're going to find that the content is the same here, but silica has been added to diffract the light, so the light goes different ways. Well, I don't want to build layers with junk in the middle. I want to build nice, solid, clear layers, and then if I want a matte, I'll maybe go to 4-aught steel wool or put a coat of matte as the top coat. But that's what I'll do. Anyway, it does look different when you get a little bit of finish on it. I wanted to use the other end. I'm sorry?
Never use a water-based equivalent?
I have never put a water-based finish over these dyes, and that would be an experiment that needs to be done.
It's terrible.
Don't do it, that's the answer.
Well, there you saved yourself some time.
Don't do it. You know, this is applying finish, it's no big deal. But see how my sponge is swelling?
Yeah.
That's not the sponges I've had them used in the past, it's a different brand. I don't like them.
FYI, Jim, you can't see the white sponge over your white thing. You have to pull it off to the side to see it. Because the camera kind of white is...
This camera's not working?
Well, no, it's working, but if you have the white over the white, you can't see the sponge.
Okay, now I can rub. But what you can see now is how the maple, what it looks like when it has some real finish on it. So that's what it's going to end up looking like, as shiny as I choose to make it later on. I'm sorry, question? I didn't hear. Wasn't meant to.
Okay, so that's the first coat. Now, that's all I'm going to do. And so what we have here is a platter. Yeah, it looks a little blotchy. But what's happening, this is soaking in, and it's going to soak in differentially depending on whether it's hard or soft grain.
How are you gonna do the back, the fronts?
After this dries for a little bit, I can do
You
the
said you can do it
rim.
at the same time, I was wondering how you would do that.
You can't. I'm doing finishing bowls, and the same thing, you do one side, then you do the other side. So, what I've tried to do is to give you an exposure to 3 or 4 different techniques, none of which I've done in any degree of detail. I'd love to put this lid back right on now. I'm going to see if I can find some paper around here to seal this in before we close it back up. But anybody who comes up here after the demonstration, don't bang the table. We will have Minwax wipe-on poly everywhere. So, but anyway, turning platters is a really simple thing. I'm going to do this decorated platter thing later on. It's a matter of doing precisely what I've done here onto your own project, so we'd be doing that. John, comment?
Take your glove and put it on top of the,
Hey,
and then screw the lid down. Well, at least it won't spill.
That's a start, but it won't seal tightly.
No, but when you get home, you can put wax paper on it.
Right, I'll drive home with this held out.
There you go.
Here's a plastic bag, which might be better than my rubber glove because it's a little bit better. But anyway, what I've done is just simply expose you to 2 or 3 different techniques and try to do a little bit of each. And thank you, Joel. You know, you can spend a lot of time, John Louis, Bob Nolan, a number of people spend a lot of time in design transfer and coloring and so on like that. And to me, when I've done work like that, I have found more pleasure sitting in the office, transferring the design and coloring the thing that I did in turning the piece. Turning the piece is easy. So for platters, I hope I've given you some basic ideas about platters. When you do your rebate on the bottom, you've got to know exactly how deep that is. You've got to know exactly how thick the piece is. And I do like the idea of drilling a hole in the top, whether you use it with a screw chuck to start your project, as I do, or just for depth purposes. That hole tells you how, when you reach the bottom of the hole, that's where you reach your expected wall thickness from here to here. And so platter turning is pretty simple. I've done just a really basic design here. And the beading tool is a trick to separate the rim from the bowl. And I think there needs to be something that separates this area from this area from a design point of view. Any other comments, questions?
Where do you get your bullet bits? Your bullet?
Oh, the DeWalt. So if you go to Home Depot and pick up one of those DeWalt little drill bit sets, anything over, I think it's over a 1/4 inch as a bullet bit. And they are a regular bit, but they just have a little point in the center. And that's DeWalt's way of saying this will help it track straight. It's the same concept as the grad point, except it's a bullet. It's a bullet point. I like the DeWalt bits because on the larger size, they have 3 flats on them. So that when you tighten your Jacobs chuck around them onto those 3 flats, it will tend to not allow it to spin free in your chuck. That's the advantage of that. The disadvantage is if you don't get it properly centered, you'll have your bit running off center. So you look at the Jacobs chuck, put the bit in when it's almost closed, and then it'll just be fine. I think we talked about that in one of the videos someplace. When we did the one on Jacobs chucks. We talked about that. Other comments, questions, observations? Last one, Jim.
If you want to save your pins, store them with the nib or the working part down, and then they won't dry out. The solvents, if you store them up, they will evaporate and harden up after a time. If you really want to get technical, you put them in a bag and you put some argon gas in it. Blocks on.
Oh, shoot, fresh out.
I forgot mine, yeah.
Yeah, but they'll last a lot longer.
That's good. Jim, you made some comments about how they'll last. Did y'all hear those? I buy some ahead of time. I don't go over to A.B. Blick very often, so I picked up a whole bunch of the ones I know I'm going to use over. I have them in a plastic bag
a sealed plastic bag, and they're in my desk drawer, and they've lasted very, very well. The key is keep them sealed from the atmosphere. I don't know how quickly A.B. Blick turns over their inventory, but apparently enough. I've never had a bad pen from them, but could be. Yes?
I use a vacuum former. Put my pens in a vacuum bottle, pull the vacuum on them.
Oh, neat
And
idea.
they stay up beautiful year after year.
You can also put them in a plastic bag if you don't have a black back, one of those things.
Yeah.
Close the bag down to almost closed, put a straw in there, suck the air out, and then seal out the bottom end. It ain't perfect, but it's better. Just like if we want to put something in here, nitrogen is the thing that you generally put on the top of the surface to prevent oxidation of your finishes. You buy this stuff called bulk oxygen, which is a tank that feels totally empty when you pay for it, but it's full of nitrogen. You squirt that with the lid on. The other thing that you can do, take a deep breath, put your soda straw into the top of your jar and exhale, and then put the lid on. You're exhaling carbon dioxide, and that's better than the oxygen that you just displaced, so that's going to last a little longer. Dave Ellsworth told me something when we had lunch a couple months ago. He doesn't use Minwax. He likes Waterlocks. Now, Waterlocks is a great finish. I love it. It's much heavier in terms of the solids that it has, but it sure oxidizes in the can real fast. I hate it because of that. He said, well, what he does, I always see people, you put marbles in the bottom to displace it, and that works fine, but then you got to wash the marbles later. He said he just adds water. And what happens is the water sinks to the bottom and sends your Waterlocks to the top. So I took one of these jars of Minwax, and I did that water thing. So as I used a little down, I poured some water in, and it does. It goes right to the bottom and lifts this stuff up. It worked really fine until I got to the last 1/4. At that point, I took the lid off one day, and it was totally solid. But for the first 3/4 of the bottle, water worked fine. So it works with Waterlocks, not so well with Minwax Wipe on Poly. Differences in the chemical formulas. But displacing the air out of here is what makes this stuff last longer, whatever your technique is. Other comments, questions? This is a shorter demo than I thought it would be, but we got through all 4 stages here. Okay, guys, thank you.
Hail the new president.
Pick up your chair.